I'm a huge fan of making sketchbooks and just sketchbooking in general. I learned how to make sketchbooks about 4 or 5 years ago, and since then I have made and used 3 sketchbooks for myself and 4 sketchbooks as gifts, and now I'm making one in this video. I love making sketchbooks for myself because they can be one of a kind and designed to my specific taste, and they're currently a much cheaper alternative to buying pre-made sketchbooks. They've made great gifts for my artistic peers, and ever since I've shown my homemade sketchbooks online, people have been asking me for a tutorial on how I make them. So here it is. Here you go. I didn't think I would make this video for a while because the core of my method comes from Oliver's Antics video, which he released a few years ago, and this is where I first learned how to make them. We'll have this video linked in the description if you want to go watch his method, but just know it's a little different from how I make my sketchbooks personally. The 2 main reasons I decided to make my own tutorial instead of just continually promoting Oliver's video was because A, I do things a bit differently. I have mostly just adjusted his method to work more effectively for me and how my brain works, and B, I thought that creating a more recent video on this topic would reach more people who would like a relatively cheap way to create sketchbooks on their own. So without further ado, this is what you'll need for materials. All the materials I use in this video were things I already had around my house aside from the actual paper that I put in this book. But keep in mind that this is coming from someone who's made these before and just owns a lot of art supplies in general. So there's a chance you may or may not have all of these already. To make your sketchbook, you'll need 2 cereal boxes or any generally thin cardboard boxes. These boxes will serve as your cover for your sketchbook. Your paper of choice, keeping in mind that the number of sheets will be doubled and the size will be cut in half since we'll be folding them in half for our sketchbook. Embroidery thread to sew your pages in. You can do white for it to blend in or a fun color to have it match decorations, whatever you want. You'll want wet glue or some wet glue alternative and tape, good sewing / embroidery needle big enough for your thread, a pair of scissors, a ruler, and finally whatever material you desire to cover your sketchbook with. I'll be using some pattern paper I got from Michael's. It's from this big paper pad that I found in the clearance section, so all of this paper cost me $6. Unfortunately, their big pads of paper tend to be about $20 from the last time I checked, but you can check the clearance section or elsewhere if you want to buy them for less. I'm sure you could find cheap alternatives in like thrift stores. I've seen them at thrift stores before. You can also buy paper in single sheets. For this, you'll need 4 sheets, needing 2 sheets that cover the outside of the cover and 2 sheets that cover the inside part of the cover. You don't have to use paper on the cover of your sketchbooks. You can use whatever materials you want, like fabric. You could just let your cereal boxes be the star of the show, I guess, or even just decorate that cardboard with acrylic markers. It's up to you. It's entirely your own sketchbook. It's meant to be fun for you and what you want to do with it. The first thing I do when making my sketchbooks is get all my signatures folded. Your signatures are the sections of paper that you'll sew into your book. So with each sheet of paper, you'll fold it in half, hamburger style, as I say to small children. To get a nice fold, I tend to press and drag the handle of my scissors along the fold so that it lays a bit better. I know that you can use a bone fold for this too, but I don't have one of those, and even if I did, the scissors work perfectly fine for me. I'm not changing this. Depending on how thick your paper is, you may want more or fewer sheets in your signature. For example, when I used thinner drawing paper in one of my sketchbooks, I made a signature with 4 sheets, and in a sketchbook where I use thicker mixed media paper, I made it with 3, so it would be easier for my needle to go through. To make signatures, you just take your folded sheets and then have them sit inside each other like this. Make as many signatures as you want for your sketchbook. I tend to make about 6 for mine, but it's another one of those it's up to you and your personal preferences sort of thing. If you like your sketchbooks with more pages, add more. If you like your sketchbooks with fewer pages, add less. Once you have all your signatures set up, stack them together in a pile and draw out where you'll be sewing your pages in. You'll be drawing 3 dots on the crease of your signature, 1 in the middle, and then 1 on both the top and the bottom of your signatures, with about 1 inch of space between the dot where the hole will go and the edge of the paper. You can measure this out for each one if you want to be exact, but I'm not one to care that much for precision, so I like to just eyeball mine. Once you've marked all of your signatures, now is a good time to use the needle to poke a hole through all the creases of your signatures so that when you sew them in later, you won't have to poke the holes as you're sewing them in. That's all we needed to do for the paper right now, so let's get some work done on making our cover. With my first cardboard box, I open it up and have it lay down flat. Then I use my signature as a guide for my measurements before I cut anything out. I place my signature in the bottom corner of my box where the spine of the cereal box, this is usually the spot where nutrition information tends to be, and trace around my signature. With all my signatures in a stack, I hold them standing upright with the creases against the spine of the cereal box and trace this part as well. I like to hold my signatures tight together while I trace them so that when I sew them in, the pages will be as tight as I'm holding them right now, theoretically. Using my scissors, I cut the shape out a little bigger than how I drew it, just so that there's a little bit of wiggle room for my pages to breathe. Once I have the shape cut out, I trace it on the other side of the cereal box and repeat this 2 more times on the other cereal box as well, cutting them all out. In the end, you should have 4 of these pieces, but for right now, we only need 2 of these pieces, so just put the other ones off to the side. For this part, I would recommend using some sort of wet glue. Alternatively, you can use rubber cement. This dries really strong to itself, but you have to apply it to both sides of what you're gluing together and wait for it to fully dry. Or you could even use acrylic paint as glue for this part. There's a lot of alternatives. You'll want to adhere the spines of your cardboard together with both sides of the cover facing outwards. With that, congrats! Now you have the bones of your sketchbook cover. On the inside spine of your cover, you are going to make lines that align with the holes you already poked into your signatures. If you want, you can measure out where each signature will go. When I do this, however, I like to not do that. It's mostly just me being lazy and not caring if they're evenly spaced out or not, and I found that my results don't change too much when I do this, but let's keep in mind that I've made many sketchbooks by this point, so maybe I can afford to be more careless than the average person should be. I also don't pre-poke holes for this part either, but you'd probably benefit from doing so. I just don't personally enjoy the process of poking them before I sew each signature in. I just personally enjoy the process of poking them before I sew each signature in individually as I go along. My needle is kind of dull at this point because of how much I've used it, so sometimes I use my scissors as a handle to help me press the needle through the cardboard, because otherwise it will hurt my hand a little too much. Speaking of sewing them in, here's how you do that. This is probably one of the most time-consuming parts of this project. They do take a while to sew in, and it's probably my least favorite part, but whatever, it's like the most important and necessary part of the whole process, so you kind of just have to deal with it. My method of sewing signatures in is fairly simple. Take your embroidery thread. You could try other thread, but I find that embroidery thread works best. And I cut a piece that's as wide as your human body wingspan, like as far as you spread your arms apart. Okay, perfect. Okay, this should last a few signatures. Having more than you need is always better, so you're not partway through sewing in a signature and only then realizing you don't have enough thread. I start sewing in my signatures by tying a knot at the end of my thread twice so it doesn't go through the hole. Then I go through with the back center hole of my sketchbook spine and through the center hole of my signature. Once my thread has gone through both of these center holes, I go through the top hole of my signature and then my sketchbook spine, then go back through the bottom holes. Once my string is back on the inside of my signature, I'm going to go through the middle hole again, but being as careful as possible to avoid the string and knot that's already pressed up against that middle hole. Once your string has safely made it through, now is the time where you tighten the crap out of this signature so it doesn't slide around. I've made sketchbooks where the signatures are not tight enough, and the sketchbook still works. It's just not great for them to slide around. They feel very fragile like this. When everything is tight, snug, and secure, you can tie your signature in place by creating this little, like, I don't know, like 4 shape with your string. the thread under the line across the spine, going back up through the triangle of the 4, pull up as tight as you can, and then go up and down until it's as tight as can be. Repeat this a second time for extra security, cut the extra string, and your signature is secure. Repeat this process until all of your signatures are sewn in securely. Congrats! If you did everything correctly, by this point you should have the most janky looking sketchbook you've ever seen, because we haven't added the cover yet. All that thread on the spine right now is very exposed, but don't worry, we will cover this up shortly. So remember how I had you put aside those 2 cardboard pieces from earlier? Now here's the time to bring those back. Take your cardboard pieces and glue them together the exact same way we did with the pieces from earlier. If sewing in all of the pages into the sketchbook was the worst part for you, don't worry. This is the best part where we get to actually decorate our covers. Once your pieces are glued together, you can attach your outside cover decorations. I placed my cardboard piece along my paper, leaving about an inch long border around my cardboard cover. To attach the decorative paper, I personally like to use wet glue or rubber cement for this, but I've also used tape before, and that works as well. If you're using something like fabric for your cover, my bet would be hot glue or maybe even fabric glue would work best to attach your materials to the cover piece. I usually end up needing 2 sheets of my paper to get the whole thing covered, keeping in mind that the paper I use is a foot long in either direction. I don't mind how this looks with the sheet clearly kind of layered on top, but if you do, you can always add something like washi tape to cover it up. When I am attaching my paper to my cover, I make sure that the paper can bend along with the shape of my book. Once your cover is decorated to your liking, you can attach this cover to your janky sketchbook. Again, I'd recommend some sort of wet glue-like substance to attach these together. Now would be a good time to make sure everything is folding and bending the way you want it to. Now I want you to take the first page and the last page of your sketchbook and glue them to the inside cover. For this part, you can use tape or really whatever sticks this page to the inside cover. It doesn't have to be the most secure thing ever because we're going to cover this up. I like to use glue sticks for this. Once your first and last pages are glued to the covers, I want you to take your scissors and essentially cut out a square at all the corners of your sketchbook. Then fold these sections in and tape them down. You may need to cut them a bit more for them to fit nicely, but once it's all taped in, you should have something that looks like this on both sides of your sketchbook. Now this is the final step. Are you just so ready and just so excited? This is finally starting to look like a book and not just a bunch of crap sewn together haphazardly. Yay! With your other piece of decorative paper or whatever you're using, cut out a piece that's the same size as your sketchbook pages. Take this cutout sheet and tape/glue it into the inside of your cover at both the front and the back of your sketchbook. And there you go, your very own homemade sketchbook. You can add some extra things like inside pockets, page markers, little clasps that keep your sketchbook shut, whatever you want at this point to make it just to your liking. I hope this video was helpful for those of you who had been requesting that I make a tutorial on my process, and if you make a sketchbook using my method, please show me. I'd love to see it. Sketchbooks have gotten so expensive lately. I feel like finding one that checks all the boxes is very difficult. I don't like spiral bound, and I like my paper to be decent quality, and apparently to get that, my only option is to spend way more money than I want to. When I create my own sketchbooks, they are curated specifically to my liking. If I want a specific type of paper as a square sketchbook, the only thing holding me back is my own wrist pain. I also just love how accessible this method is too. I know that not everyone has these materials lying around their house, especially the paper, but I feel like you can find ways to do this even without having to spend money on that. I once was lucky enough to find a donated paper pad and ended up being able to make 3 sketchbooks out of it entirely for free. You can also recycle paper from unfinished sketchbooks. You can use paper grocery store bags for toned paper if you want, or even use a variety of different papers you have to make a multi-papered sketchbook. There are a lot of ways you can make this work for you. And buying paper from the store doesn't have to be expensive either. I bought a $12 pad of mixed media paper and could make 2 sketchbooks out of it, and I would bet good money that you can find a sketchbook like mine for $7 at Blix. Hi, editing Hayden here. It sounds like I did my math wrong. I didn't do my math wrong. When I wrote it in the script, I thought that the paper pad was $14, and then I went to Blix and I thought that it was $12, so I changed it when I read it out loud, but I didn't change the part where I said it was $7, so I sound like I'm bad at math. I know half of 12 is $6. I promise you, I know that. I'm smart. Anyways, that's all. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you can love me challenge by liking and subscribing, as well as following my social media that will be linked in the description. Again, if you want to make one, show it to me, Rachel. Show it to me, please. With that, have a great rest of your breakfast, lunch, and or dinner. Amen and good night.